Hi, this is Dr. Brian Walsh. I was talking to a friend on Facebook earlier today, and she was asking about thyroid and thyroid physiology. I had done a presentation a while back, and here's an abbreviated version of it. I figured if one person has a question, maybe a lot of people do. So this will give you a really concise but very detailed overview of what thyroid physiology is and what kind of testing you can run in order if you want to see if you have a thyroid problem. The thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped gland at the base of your neck, and it's the major metabolism gland in your body. It basically tells your body how hot to run, it tells your heart rate to go up, it tells your digestion to work faster or better, and then the opposite is true. If your thyroid function is low, then you'll have sluggish digestion, tendencies towards being cold, and you have a very slow metabolism. For example, weight loss will be very difficult the slower your thyroid is going. There are three main issues with thyroid testing nowadays, and this is a major frustration of mine in the medical industry. One is just a lack of understanding, and this is a guarantee. When we go through in just a couple seconds here, thyroid physiology, when you understand it, you'll have a better understanding than the vast majority of doctors as it comes to thyroid physiology. And I know this because I talk to other doctors about it. So the first part is a lack of understanding. The second part is poor testing. They're not running adequate labs to really look at what's going on with thyroid physiology. And then lastly, and I've mentioned this before, is the reference ranges are far too broad and they really don't catch anything other than really overt disease. So the thyroid gland, there's many. It's vast in terms of the amount of symptoms that they have if it's low functioning, and these are just a few to kind of give you an idea. One is fatigue, weight gain, depression, constipation. Like I said, a sluggish thyroid will slow down digestion, so you'll have tendencies towards constipation. Also things like dry skin, flaky hair, things like that. Poor circulation, muscle joints, aches and pains, forgetfulness, loss of ambition, and decreased interest. And those are just a few. Another thing to mention is cholesterol. Everybody's talking about cholesterol nowadays. About 30, 40, 50 years ago, elevated cholesterol was diagnostic of hypothyroidism. Nowadays, most doctors want to give people Lipitor and statins to lower the cholesterol without really looking at the thyroid function. And so that's something to consider if you do have high cholesterol. Now, this is a really, really broad overview of thyroid physiology, and I only give this to you right now because I want you to have an understanding of how many areas really need to be looked at if you want to have an adequate understanding in laboratory testing of what's going on with your thyroid gland. Now, way up in your brain, you have something called your hypothalamus. That talks to your pituitary gland via something called thyrotropin-releasing hormone. Then your pituitary gland talks to your thyroid gland via another hormone called thyroid-stimulating hormone. It tells the thyroid hormone it tells the thyroid gland how much thyroid hormone to produce. Your thyroid gland produces a number of thyroid hormones, the vast majority being T4 and T3, and of them, the majority is T4 itself. Now, T4, understand, is a prohormone, meaning it's a precursor to the more active form, which is T3. So T4 doesn't really do much. Now, it circulates through your body, bound to something called thyroid-binding globulin. This is a protein. So picture a boat or many boats floating around your bloodstream, and the thyroid hormone T4 jumps into this boat and circulates around your bloodstream until it's ready to be converted in your liver. Now, once it does get to your liver and a couple other tissues, T4 is converted, it's excreted, some of it, and it can be converted into a number of different things. One of those is T3, and this is really important. T3 is the active form of thyroid hormone. It is the one that exerts its metabolic effects in the body on the cells. So it has a possibility to be excreted, but again, it is what goes into the cell itself. So T3 is critical for not having hypothyroid symptoms. Reverse T3 is not terribly important right now, but T3S, which is T3 sulfate and T3 acetic acid, these are, once converted, go into your gut and are converted into T3 by the bacteria in your gut, and then it can go into the cell and exert its metabolic effects. Now, standard medicine today, when looking at thyroid function, primarily looks at TSH. That's it. And if you're lucky, they'll also look at T4. But again, the reference ranges are too broad, and so many times people with thyroid issues are not found. They don't look at T3, they don't look at thyroid binding globulin levels, they don't look at conversion issues, and they don't consider the gut as a possible mechanism for why somebody is suffering from hypothyroid symptoms. Okay, so here's a real quick review. Hypothalamus talks to the pituitary, and that talks to the thyroid gland, which produces two hormones. The vast majority is T4. T4 gets converted into the liver after being carried by thyroid-binding globulin. It can be excreted or converted into a number of compounds, one of which is T3, which can be excreted or go into the cell to exert its effects, or T3 sulfate and acetic acid go into the gut, converted by bacteria to T3 and goes into the cell. Now here's everything that can go wrong with thyroid gland, and understand that all of these things can cause hypothyroid symptoms. One is your hypothalamus doesn't produce thyrotropin releasing hormone well. Two is your pituitary might not be working well, and this is pretty common, to be honest with you, and it doesn't produce adequate amounts of TSH. Now your thyroid gland itself might not be working well. This is considered to be hypothyroidism, but understand that any one of these defects can cause what medicine considers to be hypothyroidism, which is a dysfunctional thyroid gland. You can also have thyroid binding globulin issues. If you have too many boats floating around in your bloodstream, your thyroid hormone will not be able to get out of these boats and be converted into T3. You can have overconversion issues, which is sometimes happens in women that have PCOS and high testosterone levels. You can have underconversion issues, meaning that the liver is not converting the T4 to the active form of T3, which your body needs. You can have dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of good to bad bacteria in your gut, and therefore that T3 won't be converted. Or you can have actual cellular receptor site dysfunction for thyroid hormone. This is usually caused by things like elevated cortisol, vitamin A deficiencies. And then the last one is autoimmune disease. And this is in a different category because autoimmune disease is really an immune system issue and not necessarily a thyroid issue. It just happens to be attacking thyroid physiology. Okay, now here's a really good example. This woman came to me. She's been on Synthroid for a number of years because she was hypothyroid, diagnosed by an endocrinologist. And according to her endocrinologist, the Synthroid, which is synthetic T4, is managing her condition. Now she'll tell you otherwise because she feels like crap, basically. So you notice that in the flag zone there, only one test came up low, but we use a different reference range. We use a little bit tighter one, so we find things a little bit sooner than some other people. First thing that we saw is TSH is a little bit low. I like to see that at 1.8. Thyroxine, or T4 itself, was low, and she's taking a synthetic T4, but I like to see that at about 6. T3 uptake, 28 is the cutoff that I consider to be high, so that's saying to me that she might have high estrogen levels causing that the BOAT, the thyroid binding globulin that holds onto the thyroid hormone. Her free thyroxine index is a little bit low. I like to see that at about 2 at the very least. T4 is low. That's almost laboratory low, to be honest with you. And the free T3, which is the active hormone that goes into the cell, is not only low, it's laboratory low. So she's on Synthroid and supposedly is being managed. And this is probably because the doctor only looks at TSH, which is in the laboratory reference range, so they probably think she's fine. Again, symptomatically, she'll tell you that she's not at all. So here's what we found. That her pituitary gland is not producing adequate amounts of TSH, maybe due to cortisol. It might be due to the Synthroid that she's taking, though. She doesn't have adequate amounts of T4. She has elevated amounts of thyroid binding globulin, so the hormone that she does have is bound anyways. And then she has low T3 because she's probably not converting or releasing the thyroid hormone into her cell. So she's a wreck. She has basically no thyroid function for all of these reasons, yet she is considered to be managed by her endocrinologist. And so what to do? One is to manage stress. I won't get into all that right now. Manage insulin and blood sugar levels. You need to eat a whole food diet. Selenium, vitamin A, and zinc all have really critical roles in thyroid physiology in terms of conversion, the receptor receptor site on the cell, and then get tested. And just like the lab that I showed you was, look at TSH, total T4, free T4, total T3, free T3, T3 uptake, and antibodies. And the antibodies are important because 80% of hypothyroidism is caused by an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So hopefully that's been helpful, and thanks very much.